The XY Advisor podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. All discussion is limited to publicly available information and should not be interpreted as legal, professional, or financial advice. XY Advisor does not hold an AFS license nor provide any financial services. Before making investment decisions, you should obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor.
Financial advisors help Australians live better lives, and we're great at it. But what about us? For us to thrive in the coming years, I'm here to ask a very big question. How can we live better, run better businesses, and help more clients along the way? My name is Jessica Brady, and I would love for you to join me as I listen and learn from experts who answer these very big questions. I am lucky enough to record most of my podcasts on Gadigal land.
This podcast is brought to you by Challenger, who believe in providing customers with financial security for a better retirement. Challenger's lifetime annuities provide different payment solutions to suit your client's financial circumstances and needs. For income certainty, they can choose CPI indexed or fixed payments. Alternatively, they can choose to have payments linked to changes in the RBA cash rate or investment markets. Challenger can provide your clients with a monthly income for life, so they can enjoy today, knowing they'll always have income in the future.
This week's guest is Adam Crabbe. He's a risk strategy specialist at Zurich. But I wanted Adam to talk about something that happened in his life that was pretty dramatic, and how advisors can help people when something unexpected occurs in their life. It was quite fascinating, and I left the conversation with my mind buzzing with ideas of how we can support better conversations and make sure our team are trained to pick up on cues and help think outside of the box. I hope you enjoy today's chat. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Jess. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Actually,
Good.
Really well. Thank you.
That is very, very good to hear. And it'll make more sense as we go through the conversation today why I asked that with a little bit of a pause in the beginning. I feel like I always say this because it's true, but I think we're in for a fascinating conversation today. Before we get into the really specific reason as to why I wanted to have you as a lovely and esteemed guest for today's podcast, for the people that don't know you, Adam, maybe you can help them learn a little bit more about you and help us know what is your story.
I'd be happy to do that. So I am a bit of an insurance nerd, Jess. I hate to admit that, but it is true. So love life insurance, love advice, and those two things have really stepped me to where I am today, which is, official business card says risk strategy specialist, but I kind of create content all around life insurance and advice and sort of bring that to the fore at PD Days conferences. I've been doing that for a number of years and loving it.
So let's learn a little bit more about Adam. So that's your work life.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about sort of your other life. Presumably you have another life. I know you have another life. Tell me a bit about that.
I do. So I am married. In fact, just celebrated my, 23rd wedding anniversary, which is ridiculous.
Oh my gosh, congrats. Wow.
Thank you. I have 4 delightful children. They are 4 teenagers. And so having a job that involves travel is fantastic at the moment. I don't have to be around. No, but they're wonderful. Eldest is currently 19, youngest is 13 going on 14. So there's a lot of attitude around the house. But, we have it pretty good in that regard. I have 2 fur pets as well, love dogs. And that's kind of my life outside of work.
You have 4 teenage children.
I do.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh. And you had 4 children. I didn't realize they were all teenagers. Wow, what a time you must have had over the last few years.
Oh, mate, COVID has definitely taught us a few things. Patience is one of them. And I think anyone out there that is thinking about kids or has kids and surely it gets better with age, I think the short answer to that is no. But I'm told it will improve eventually.
Just spreading hope early in the conversation today, Adam. Well done. Thank you. All the people that are struggling with toddlers, learning that actually in 10 years' time, it's not going to be much easier. Thanks,
Yes.
Adam. One thing you haven't mentioned, though, is that you quite like riding a motorbike.
I do. I think it's important that we all do something outside of work, outside of family. And I know you probably got a question a bit later on for me around what's good for mental health. But honestly, for that, it is that. It's motorcycle riding. It's something I kind of fell into. I was a kind of commuter here. I'm in Sydney and, did for many years, buses and trains and getting to the office. And one afternoon, it was a 3-hour trip from door to door. And I remember getting home saying to the wife, look, enough's enough. There's got to be a better way of doing this. And I have motorcyclists in the family and my brother and my stepfather. And we just thought, well, why not do it? Why not give it a go? So I was a bit late to the motorcycling. I've been doing it for years now, but certainly not something I did when I was young. And once I started, it was like an addiction.
What happened?
So, yes, often I think one of the best bits of advice I got when I first started was you're going to come off at some stage. Generally, you sort of brush yourself off and pick yourself up and off you go. But yeah, that wasn't my experience. So I was actually on holidays, on annual leave, and it was a beautiful sunny afternoon. So I decided to just go for a quick ride, and I was only 5 minutes from home actually. And even the police are not quite sure what happened. So I didn't pass out, didn't black out, but going through a roundabout, police believe I may have been nudged. All the traffic was going in one direction, but still not quite sure. Next thing I remember is coming into contact with the ground on my back initially, then on my front, rolling and seeing my bike doing flips next to me, and ended up kind of on the side barrier. And as I didn't black out, I remember everything. I remember people coming up to me. I remember the excruciating pain. I remember the fun ambulance trip, which then became a intensive care ambulance trip, because they kind of leaned me forward, took a look at my back and realised that there was some damage there. And the ambo, I remember he saying to me, I'm going to give you something now, and you're not going to remember much after that. And he was right. It was, I can't remember what it was, but it was some form of opioid, and it was not pleasant. I just remember, seeing things and hearing things. But so what I managed to do, Jess, was once I finally got to hospital, I had shattered my right scapula, so my right shoulder blade. I had broken 7 ribs, punctured and collapsed lung, a little bit of blood getting in as well. So they quickly did some scans, got me up to the high dependency unit. And, I spent, I only spent a week in hospital. And that's because my beautiful wife is not in paid work. She works very hard at home looking after the kids.
Thank you for being very specific about not being in paid work. She's at work, but she does. Thank you. I just want to be very clear on calling that out.
Definitely. She works really hard. And, she was able to support me outside of work, because I was, from insurance speak, I was totally disabled for a period of about 7 to 8 weeks. I couldn't really do anything. Anyone listening that's had broken ribs will know that anything you try and do is debilitating, whether it's sneezing, coughing, talking,
breathing.
Everything. So I kind of made a bit of a mess of myself.
You did. You really did. And so why I wanted to have you on today's chat is, as you have already pointed out, you come from a life insurance background. Ironically, you do something that many underwriters would shiver at, which is ride a bike in Sydney. And then you had this pretty spectacular accident that was debilitating for a long time. And you're talking about the period that was sort of that acute phase. And I want to sort of get stuck into a bit more around how advisors can support people when they go through this. But no doubt there was a much longer journey to recovery, if you ever will be fully recovered from this.
Yeah, definitely. It was a weird period, Jess. I remember, and being in hospital, you have a lot of time to think and just question what you're doing. And the journey piece was a topic one, and I'm happy to sort of, step you through that in this particular podcast. But I think what was one of the surprising things of the whole event was when I was, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks in, was back at home that stage, hardly even walking. One of the first questions I said to my surgeon, and I remember the words just sort of spilling out of my mouth, not really thinking too much of it, was, how soon can I get back on the bike? Which you might think is like, it's nutso, right? But
yes,
it's such a weird thing. And I think this is something that advisors really need to be mindful of, is if you are ever engaging with a customer, a client, and you're suddenly questioning what they're doing, whether it's occupation, whether it's outside of work, there's that logical piece which may suggest that you need to say, well, you know what, you need to stop doing that and do something else, something a bit lower risk. But when you think about what makes people tick and, what is good for someone's mental health can involve different levels of, I suppose, risk. And for me, yes, mine's on perhaps the higher end of the risk spectrum, but I think not being able to do that would be detrimental to my mental health longer term, short of finding something else to do. But you think about whether it's playing soccer, whether it's, hitting this tiny little golf ball, hundreds of yards into this tiny little, like those sorts of things. Some people might say that is what they love to do. Others might think it's crazy. But there is something I think that advisors need to kind of consider in all of that, that sometimes when even things go wrong, people will either want to jump back on the horse or, in my case, back on the bike. And I think advisors need to be mindful that they may have to actually consider partnering with them through that journey.
I've never thought about that in that way. Did you find that everyone was very unsupportive when you were trying to get yourself back on the bike?
That's a great question. One I'm not actually asked very often because of what I do. Yeah, you would often think that perhaps a close support network might be like, what are you doing? You're crazy. I'm very fortunate. My wife very early on recognized and said, look, yeah, I'm happy to support you getting back on the bike. We often joke now. She says, people often get 3 strikes, you're out. I think it might be 1 strike, you might be out. But she's said to me more than once that, not being able to do that, you're a different person. And I think there's something in that, people that know people well, if they have that outlet that's not work, that's maybe not family, but does allow the body to detox, then people recognize that. My mum was one of the first to say, you're getting back on, are you? Like, got to make sure you get back on. So yes, in short, I had a really supportive family. I've had some colleagues and others that have, laughed and said, surely you're nuts. What are you doing? Even if you just, tone down the risk, maybe get off the motorized version and do the pedal version. But, donning Lycra, that's not for me. And look, there's risk in everything, right? That's the weird thing, whether I'm riding a push bike and even doing, I love going for a walk at lunch. So just an hour's walk, just to clear the air, clear the head. There's risks in that. There's, thousands of pedestrians that end up in hospital each and every year because of transport-related accidents. So I think there is the view that regardless of what people do to help them through their life, what they do outside of work, there is a level of risk. And equally, choosing to do nothing, sitting on the couch, has risks as well, right? Like we could start to develop these horrendous chronic illnesses and, that's not for me either. So yeah, it's a weird one, and probably a long answer to a question, but I'm very fortunate that I had a terrific support network that were quite encouraging of me to get back out and do what I love doing.
And are you fully recovered?
Yes, is the short answer. I was fortunate that the injuries sustained were ones that could, recover quite well. It's actually just over 2 years now, and I've got pretty much full mobility back in that arm.
He's lifting his arm. I can see it going up and down. Well done.
Podcasting, but now at this time of this recording, it's winter, and usually that's the period where you start to feel little things, like muscles just reminding you of the accident. But honestly, I'm 100%. I'm lucky, very lucky. I think if the bike had decided to land on me, then it would have been a very different story. It was a complete write-off. I put down part of my luck, I suppose, to the fact that I do wear like full gear all the time. There are some riders that I see in shorts, t-shirts, thongs, and I just question sanity at that point. Maybe because I've come off, right? But for me, it's a saying in our motorcycling is all the gear all the time, and that's definitely me. I do look like an astronaut when I jump on that bike. So
I think that's great.
Yeah, it's risk, but I manage the risk, and maybe that too, Jess, is because of the work that we're in, right? It's life insurance, it's advice, it's risk management. I acknowledge it, I understand it, and I accept it.
So let's talk about the advice side of things. You were insured.
Yes.
You have good. You presumably have an advisor, had an advisor?
Yes.
Are you comfortable sharing what you wanted that interaction to look like, or what best practice could have looked like for you, and what you needed and what your family needed at different points of the journey?
Yeah, definitely. It's something I think that not only I learnt from, but it sort of led me to create, a piece of work for Zurich, the client connection. But really, it allowed me time to step back and understand what was perhaps important to me from an advice relationship, which regrettably for me wasn't a great experience. And I perhaps put that down to the fact that maybe I didn't have the right discussion maybe with an advisor early on about what was perhaps important for me if something was to go wrong. And I don't think there's any fault per se on the advisor in my particular situation, but I think that maybe there's that understanding of, well, surely this is someone who has a large support network, as you know, 4 kids, wife who could provide me, 24-hour day care, surgeon, GP, a fantastic employer in Zurich, a supportive family. And I think many advisors are probably listening thinking, well, is there room for someone else? Like what potentially could an advisor bring to that table? But I think the easiest way to answer that would be, imagine yourself in a situation where your life is effectively pause and everybody around you is just still on play. And while I did have support, phenomenal support, I felt there was something missing.
Okay. And
it was perhaps someone that could just, check in from an insurance perspective, are the claims payments coming through? But even more than that, and I think this is where I'm noticing now some risk specialists are really differentiating themselves, is getting themselves into a position where even if there's not a claim, right, it could be a non-claim, but something's happened. What those advisors are doing is they're stepping in and they're just being that sounding board for, are you okay? Like, is money coming through? It could be from a workers' comp. It could be from a motor accident claim. It could be some other mechanism. It could just be from their work. But more than that, for me, I think one of the things that I did and would highly recommend if for advisors are wanting to deal with this and understand some of the non-financial stuff they could do is I tracked my milestones. And they were daily, they were weekly, but just allowing me to be, okay, well, I'm in a position now where I'm taking, 35 medications a day. I don't like that. I want to try and work on improving that. So I couldn't write clearly, but I used my phone and just documented verbally, where I was at any particular point. And, over the weeks and months, I'd look back at it and say, wow, I've really progressed well in that regard. I've gone from, 35 to 20 tablets a day, and that decreased, I think, by about week 6 or 7 to, a dozen or so. And I remember my surgeon, Jess, saying to me, Adam, don't be a hero. Take the medication. I'm like, well, but I want to be on track. I want to try and get myself off these if I can. So it was these little things that I was doing, even measuring how far up I could move my arm over time. I think week 7, I could finally lay flat so I could lie back in bed, and just these little 1%ers, and maybe having someone to kind of check in and say, hey, when last we spoke, you said the money was coming in and you were doing well with your meds. How's that progressing? How many days a week you need doing the physio? Have you moved to the exercise physiologist yet? What's happening? So I think in that regard, those are probably things I would recommend, even positioning with clients. And that I think in itself is a challenge, because if you'd asked that of me before the accident, it would have been a hard one to answer. What sort of support would I have wanted? I don't know is the short answer, but maybe sharing these sorts of stories to say, well, look, these are the things that other customers, other people in the community are wanting in a time of crisis. Is that something which aligns to someone else's values? So yeah, my advice relationship regrettably wasn't fantastic. The advice firm did contact me, oddly enough, just because it was time for a quote unquote review. And this was about 2 weeks after the accident.
Okay.
It wasn't the advisor, but someone in the firm that actually rang. So I said to them what had happened, and that they got off the phone pretty quickly because they felt that I was, they were maybe intruding, but I don't know if that information was fed back to the advisor. So yeah, throughout the journey, I then actually didn't hear back from the advice firm at all. So yeah, look, as I say, not that I think there's any fault particularly on a particular advisor or firm, but maybe part of that was not really setting the precedent for perhaps what I would have expected as a client, as a customer in that regard.
Adam, my brain has got so many questions for you. Why hadn't you called your advisor yet? Were you still not in a good, were you intending on, what was your intention at that point? No, knowing that you were pretty sick.
Yeah. Look, I actually have family members also that are advisors, and I've chosen deliberately to deal with advisors outside the family. So I'm in a situation where I'm thinking of just simply changing advisors. That's kind of where I'm at, and partly why I haven't actually reached out to this particular planner.
Oh, no, sorry. Let me re-ask you the question.
Sure.
When they called you for your review, which happened to be at the time of when this was all going down, was there a particular reason why you hadn't engaged them at that point or soon after? Presumably you knew you were going to have to go on claim?
Yeah. I think for me it was more that there was a level of, I kind of knew what I was doing, so that was part of it. But even though I do know what I was doing, that soon after the accident, I wasn't in the right headspace. So it was probably about the time that I was actually going back to work, which was about 3 months after the accident, that I was kind of in a space where I was then thinking about, well, why hasn't the advisor run me back yet? Or maybe I should reach out to them. But there was so much that was going on in my life at the moment, because also that time I was starting to go back to work was also when the COVID lockdowns had happened. So I'd felt like I'd been tracking these milestones. I was on track to going back to work, and then bang, another roadblock had happened. And so I think there was a culmination of things, Jess, that when I look back now, I think, well, maybe I should have just picked up the phone and given them a call. But I think part of it was that I kind of felt like I knew what I was doing, but then there was a lot going on, and also that I think mentally I wasn't quite 100% on track.
It brings up a very good conversation with staff members about, almost for any advisor that's listening. I mean, I don't know what everyone does, but we do weekly meetings, almost bringing you up as a case study to any of our team members who get on the phone and who have interactions with members, and making sure that they understand what you might have needed in that moment and how to ask you exploratory questions to find out what they could do to help, and obviously make sure that that gets fed back to the advisor and there's some sort of thread or workflow or something started, because that's a training issue.
So yeah, I think it's a great point, Jess. The fact that if as a business you kind of regroup with your staff each week and just sort of talk through, any issues, what's been happening, and the fact that, someone like me or, a client, you just reached out for review for a particular client and found out they've just, been in a serious accident, multiple broken bones, they're back out of hospital. So yeah, hopefully someone in that team then might be able to say, well, gee, maybe we should, do something, put them onto a bit of a regular, even just a phone catch up to say, hey, what's happening? It's been 2 weeks now. Have you spoken with your physio? What's the latest update? Is the money coming through from whatever source it is? But yeah, just making sure that what is essentially maybe expected of that particular client, if there is any expectation, or maybe just asking the question, is there anything you need from us? Is it okay if we contact you, say, in the next couple of weeks, just to kind of check in, reflect in on some of like the milestones, for example, that I mentioned? Because I think part of the work that we've done actually at Zurich is that while, technical expertise from planners is important, what a lot of clients are really looking for is that kind of interpersonal piece, what the technical brings to their situation, this trust, this care, honesty, that these sorts of things that I think really come to the fore when something does go wrong. And that could mean just, picking up the phone and just checking in, a 5-minute phone call. And I know many advisors we speak to say that they're time poor, and we get that, but being able to maybe just have that opportunity just to sort of check in, that I think can really help be a differentiator for advisors in business.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking as you're speaking, there's an element of pragmatism here. Like perhaps in your circumstance, which is a really interesting one, like if you have a big business and you have someone who's potentially quite green or quite new, who their sole job is to organize reviews or renewal conversations, and then they're sort of given this information, we know that when people have big life things happen, as humans, really, we're a bit shit at knowing what to say. Someone gets sick, someone's injured, someone passes away that's close to someone. Like, we don't quite feel like we've got the coping mechanisms. And so we sort of turn and run the other way. And so, I'm just thinking about my team. We've got young, green people. I'd like to think that they would absolutely let us know. But, I think it's an important case study to put to the team and say, what would we do here? How would we tackle this? What ideas do we have? I'm going to be fascinated to hear what my team say. But I really want to drill into this milestone piece, because you've really piqued my interest here. So action item for me and probably everyone else is to go and have a fascinating discovery conversation with maybe the greenest person in the team, and then see where you go from there. But on what to do if something like your situation happens. And so thank you for sharing it. It doesn't sound like it was very pleasant, but I hope that it leads to lots of training and opportunities for us to all do better for people next time. Were you assigned, and tell me to back off. You know that you can tell me to back off if it's too much. Were you assigned a case manager of any sorts or a psych person to help you through your journey?
Yeah, so not a psych in my particular case. I don't think it was required, to be honest with you. But just thinking about a comment you made there, Jess, around engaging with your team, one of the things that I would recommend in terms of positioning this is forget what you do for work, forget that you're advisors. Imagine this is someone in your family. What would you do in that situation? And again, look, there may be a multitude of answers. Some, like you mentioned the word green, I love that. I think if you got maybe even like younger people as part of your business, they probably haven't experienced a traumatic event in their family, or maybe they were maybe too young, for example. But what is it that they would do there if they found out that it was, a sibling, a loved one? What would they do? Would they want to contact them? Would they want to stand back, leave them alone? And then I would think of that then in the context of advice, because often clients do become, I know for many businesses, an extension almost of their family. We hear advisors that are going to, events with families and funerals. And I think, therefore, that context of family becomes, I think, really important, because there may be an expectation that many clients are thinking, well, we trust this advisor like we do someone in our family. So would that then mean that the treatment should be any different?
Yeah, I mean, the logical person in me says that you would have so much care and compassion and communication and all the things, but you've got to build robust systems and processes, which I want to come to in a second. It's not how my brain works, but I've been thinking about it while you've been talking. Why I asked you about the case manager piece is, having never been through something like you, what I've heard from other people though is you can sometimes feel like no one's really helping with the ecosystem that you have to endure, and that it feels very disparate because you're working with so many different people, and often they're quite busy. Like if your GP is meant to be the sort of person in the nuclear and they have 10-minute consults, like it doesn't quite work. But to your point around having that person check in and sort of be that more holistic point, I'm trying to see if that was something that was available to you and wasn't done how you'd hoped, or do you actually just think that that's a huge opportunity for advisors to step into that space?
It's definitely a massive opportunity. I was kind of looking at, on reflection, it wasn't necessarily case managers, it wasn't the GP, everybody is time poor. And, I felt myself using my physio actually for a lot of that, just, checking in, milestone, interaction. And my physio was phenomenal, right? I'd spend, an hour with them regularly, not daily, but certainly a few times a week. And that happened for weeks on end. So you kind of get to know these people. But like you said, you alluded to, 10 minutes with a GP, many physios, including mine, they would have like back-to-backs. So they would, manipulate, manage my muscles, my shoulder and my back, and we'd chat, and then they'd move on, and I'd be doing sort of some stretching work, and they'd sort of be chatting with someone else. So I think everybody is time poor, including people around me. Like, my kids are at school, and my wife was doing things, shopping or cleaning the house, or, doing what needs to be done. And I think having somebody else there that knows your health, they know your wealth situation, they know your super, they know, like, really, that I think is an amazing opportunity for advisors to just be that extra voice to jump in to say, what's happening, how's it going, and being almost that center of influence in a way to really make sure that someone's on track. And I say that because one of the things that still resonates with me is my physio said to me, despite the physical work that's involved with physiotherapy, my physio, she said to me, look, 90% of what I do, is what she does, is mental. If people are not mentally ready to kind of go through that rehab, that recovery piece, then she can manage muscles as much as she wants. And she shared with me examples of people who were she said to me, a much worse, they were in a better situation from an accident perspective than I was, yet they're many years into rehabilitation, and because they're not geared up in their mind, they're not on that road to recovery. Yet for me, I was 3 months off work, 6 months in physio, and then a little bit of exercise physiology after it. And I was pretty much back to normal within 12 months. So, which she said to me was remarkable, but I was really wanting to get back to normality. And many will laugh at this, but wanting to get back on the bike. And after 6 months, Jess, I had a replacement bike. It's back in the garage now, and I've done close to 10,000 Ks on this new bike. So yeah, some might say, oh my God, what are you doing? But it's my release. It's that thing that is good for my mental health. And I love it.
Yeah. That's why I asked you earlier about the psych piece, because I think there has to be an acknowledgement that, how your mind goes through the journey is just as important, maybe if not more important, given what you've said, than as to how your body goes through it. So let's help advisors who feel busy, who feel time poor, like the other medical professionals you were talking about, and don't currently have a really robust claims process. So they, like me, will say to you, we want to give everyone the time and space and attention that they need and want when there's a claim. But what do you think claims best practice looks like today?
So I think a lot of it does come down to the sort of client that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with young professionals, if you're dealing with mature age clients, pre-retirees, there's likely to be a level of differentiation. But I think I used the words earlier, first responder, I think is something which should apply across the board. So just being there as a first touch, if something was to happen, you want I would certainly, from the advisors we deal with and speak with, and those risk specialists I like to engage with, they'll often say to us that they tell their clients, we want to be the first responder if something goes wrong. So you want that spouse to pick up the phone and say, look, something's happened. I just want to let you know. And that can then give, I think, the advice firm time to say, okay, so let's just, map out a bit of a process here. If it's and look, insurers, BDMs can actually help in this regard, right? If it's a fracture, if it's a broken arm, then, insurers, the industry, we kind of know what that is likely to look like from a time off work piece. So, maybe touching base with that client and say, well, look, experience shows that you should expect, X amount of weeks or X amount of months off. And then even just being proactive with that client to say, what is it that you'd like from us over this particular period? Other clients like you could expect, and it might be just checking in financially. It could be making sure if there is an opportunity to claim, what order that is. Is it through super? Is it outside of super? Is it through, an IP product? It could be that element. It might even just be a network of professionals that they may want to liaise with. So for me, for example, I'd never had a physio before. So the advisor may know of a physio that works locally, someone their clients have used and would recommend. So just kind of being that sort of source of truth and direction in a way, I think would be invaluable.
Yeah, it's almost like there's two streams at play here. There's the financial stuff piece, because there is a lot to that, all the claim forms and the follow-ups and the case management liaison and all of that stuff, which I think there could be an element of process wrapped around so that there's at least a skeleton for what a claim could look like. And of course be, and I'm talking about claims where a person has survived whatever's happened.
Yes.
But then listening to this milestone piece, it's like we need a whole different track. And I think that asking permission is such an important point of, can we do this? Is this helpful? Is this what you need? And actually getting them on board to agree to whatever it is. And then having that as sort of an element that sits next to and in tandem is something I've never really thought about, and yet it makes so very much sense.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some clients that are going to be just like, look, leave me alone. I'm happy to contact you as an advisor in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. But there's likely to be others who perhaps were like me that just wanted to have a phone call. I've known my advisor for years, so just. What it's like when you're dealing with clients over a long period, they do become maybe not friends, but certainly closer than, some other clients that you might deal with, right? And just that regular check-in would be, certainly for me would have been fantastic. And, but for other clients, you're right. I think asking that permission just so that there's that, not the ground rules, but you're sort of seeking insight into what their expectations are.
We've talked a lot today about what you needed. What did your family need that an advisor could have helped with during this period as well?
That's a good question. I think further support would have been fantastic. I know, look, speaking honestly, I was fortunate. So one of the things that my employer did actually, and we didn't know this, but literally at the front door within a week, there was like a box of food. And we were like, wow, that was like, some might think that's a bit weird, like a box of food, but these were pre-prepared meals, and they were decent size, like family size meals. So I remember my wife kind of got upset, in a good way, because she's like, well, I don't need to think about cooking now, because I've got, here's a meal here and a meal there. I don't even know what company it was, just that, it had a name of one of our big bosses at Zurich, and, as a bit of a just kind of thinking of you during this time. And that meant so much. Even like, it's like over 2 years now, and it's the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is some of those little things about, and like often family does that, right? They'll just rock up with, here's a dish of food that we wanted to make for you. It's something you don't have to think about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not that I'm suggesting advisors suddenly reach out to, food companies and start giving food, but I think those little things that people themselves may not think about, whether it's, here's a voucher for a local bloke to come and mow your lawns for a week. I know your wife enjoys whatever it is, gardening, or, here's a little voucher for it, or a Bunnings voucher. I don't know, but something that maybe aligns something out of the ordinary. It's almost like that surprise and delight, despite the fact that something significant has happened. And I think it really does show that people do genuinely care.
I think that's a very, very, very fascinating tip. I've had 2 claims since we started. It's not funny. The first one was when Glenn and I both decided to take leave over Christmas of the first year of us being on leave. And so both of us were in Europe, and we were like, oh, and it was only the 2 of us in the business. And it was Glenn's client, and I know that he basically just called him almost every week just to be like, what's going on? How are you? What can we do? And I know that the client really, really valued that. But I think being able to bring some structure and some almost house rules into what we think about, just as businesses grow or get more complicated, you just want to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. So yeah, you've given me lots and lots of food for thought. Do you have any final thoughts, ideas before I go into rapid fire questions for you? I think some of the big takeouts for me is like, don't assume that someone isn't going to want to do that thing anymore, and don't not support them through that journey, and think about how you can give them a support that is around milestones. And that's fascinating and so in line with what we do from a goals perspective. It's just through a different lens. But do you have any other sort of things that we should consider from your side?
Yeah, it really is an extension, I think, of that point you made. I think it's trying to remember that while advice does think from the head, it's shifting that in certain times to think from the heart, or that visceral, using the gut instinct approach. Sometimes you've kind of got to leave rational and reasoning to one side and just sort of check in. So that's certainly one of the things I would recommend advisors do, which I know many advisors do instinctively in some cases, but I think really dialing that up at a time of claim or non-claim, depending on the situation, would be huge.
Right. Are you ready for, I could go on all day, but we're not allowed to. Are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Yeah, hit me.
You've talked about this for the last, I don't know however long we've been chatting, but let's just formally ask you, what is one thing, Adam, that you do to look after your mental health?
I do love jumping on the back of my Triumph 900cc parallel twin. So yeah, motorcycle enthusiast. Bit more cautious these days, but still love getting on and just clearing the head.
What's a piece of advice that you would give to young Adam? I
would say go with your gut instinct. I think quite often something happens in life that I'll often deliberate on. I'm a procrastinator, Jess, and but I believe in karma, and I think sometimes things pop up in life for a reason, and if it feels right, I'd say 9 times out of 10 it's the right decision. So if I was chatting to my younger self now, it would be, when opportunities do come up, just grab it with both hands.
Love that. What's something that's big on your bucket list that you haven't ticked off yet?
Something on my bucket list. Look, I've done a few hair-raising things like skydiving and obviously motorcycle riding, so that sort of extreme side of things. I've never bungee jumped. I don't know if that's necessarily on a bucket list, but something like parasailing I think would be something I'd love to do.
Is that where you like run off a cliff with a parachute on your back?
It might be, but the one I'm thinking is where you're like on a beach and you run along the beach and there's like a boat in the water, and then when the boat takes off and then up you go. So,
and there's a string attached.
Yes, ideally.
Yeah, I'm far more into that one. Okay. We'll allow it. On this occasion, Adam, we'll allow it. You're allowed to have whatever you want on your bucket list. And do you have a book that I should read as part of my fake book club?
Look, I actually got a gift from my daughter recently, and the book is called Devoted by Dean Koontz. It was a really good read if you like a bit of I like a bit of a scare factor, a bit of thrill. So it's not for the faint-hearted, but Yeah, it was a book I enjoyed called Devoted. Nothing to do with work. But,
no, that's good. That's fine.
Yeah.
We need a balance in life. Thank you. I've already worked out that you like a thrill factor, so that's coming out in multiple areas of your life. Bless you. Adam, how can people learn more about the good work that you do? Because you've created a whole raft of things off the back of this pretty significant event, right?
Yeah, we have. So we've called it the Client Connection, but there's a series of white papers that we've published. One is Lessons in Leisure, so it's effectively the data of what people are doing, including things like motorcycling. And but then what's the advice element? So it's what are the mental health benefits? What are the risks involved? And we've even developed some tools to help advisors that want to know a little bit more, and maybe, for those clients that are reaching out saying, I wouldn't mind trying, golf or soccer, but at my age, are others doing it? The short answer is yes, we can provide you with those insights to how many others are doing it, what risks are involved, the rate of hospitalizations, whether it's low, medium, high risk. And there's some other white papers too, Jess, to enable advisors to maybe look at how to implement change in their business if they want to. And it doesn't need to be massive change. You can just be really small steps. So, yeah.
Well, I'm very happy to hear that you've made a remarkable recovery. I'm frustrated for you that you went through a pretty lonely advice journey as you were getting better. But as I say, I think, weird silver lining way, the fact that you're here talking about it and helping us learn how we can be better, and the fact that you've developed a whole heap of tools off the back of it is a beautiful way to round that out. So, Adam, I just want to say an enormous thank you for sharing a very private story with our XY community.
It's my pleasure, Jess. Thank you for the invitation. I've had a great time chatting to you.
Woohoo.